Hello everybody and welcome back to the Fortress of Solitude. Today we're going to be checking out Avengers Twilight, issue 1 by Chip Zdarsky and Daniel Acuna. Zdarsky does a kind of Kingdom Come What If Elseworlds-esque story for the Avengers this time round, taking us to a world in the future where an old retired Steve Rogers finds himself in a world he barely recognizes, made again a relic of a bygone era. Zdarsky wastes no time in setting his world building up, chronicling how this world went through H-Day, a disaster that saw Ultron back a bunch of villains and enhance their powers and release the secret identities of many heroes, resulting in many of them dying and the Avengers becoming shattered thanks to the Hulk being used in a mind control plot by Ultron. This caused a domino effect and soon Steve finds himself in a future world ruled by an Orwellian government, a new Avengers team that are all corporate lapdogs who are secretly invading countries for the US government. The news is all government controlled and fake news is spreading like wildfire. It is, obviously, and I really hate saying this because it sounds like I'm beating a dead horse, but I would be remiss in saying that it does parallel a lot of the world we see right now in the real world, especially when you look at social media and getting into stuff with like the AI stuff that's going on right now in media and fake videos and audio and pictures all just swirling around, just fueling this forever fake news social media blitz that's happening. Zdarsky takes that and kind of gives it a persona throughout this issue in that of the character of James Stark, Tony Stark's son, who is your typical rich boy tech bro asshole who works to give the people of the United States the illusion of freedom when really they don't have much, and he does this by backing the Avengers with his technology, and the Iron Man that is part of the Avengers, he gives him the armors and all of their tech is run by him and his Stark company and everything. We of course learn through the course of the book that he's actually using his comatose father's head and stripping his mind of ideas to pass as his own. It's a really interesting facet of the character and feels like Zdarsky is taking aim at those AI assholes who just rip off artists wholesale and claim they are artists too because they typed things in on a keyboard. It's such an interesting way to take a Stark character as well, since usually they are, very creative and genius people, in their own right. They have their problems, but they are legitimate geniuses, and I like that there's this guy who's just completely bankrupt of all of that as well as his morals. He's just he's a zoomer, more or less. He's a zoomer who's bought into all of that AI, chat GBT stuff and all that sort of stuff, and I think that's quite an interesting way to take a Stark, because again, it's Tony who's worked so hard at getting away from that image that he was as a younger man, and now it's just been completely ruined by the next generation. Steve, as we learn as through the course of the book as well, has been trying to fight against the lies that are being spread by the government by doing things like trying to run for Senate, and the people just aren't really interested in him anymore because he's an old man, he's got old ideals, and that's one of the running things throughout this book is everyone sees Steve's ideals as old-fashioned, even when those ideals are literally him just saying, let's tell the truth. And I think that's really quite interesting that they've reframed Steve as a man out of time, giving him something that, again, in the real world is really kind of missing from the online social media era, which is the truth. And he only really gets a chance to fight back when he learns his old friend Luke Cage has been running a small team of resistance fighters called the Defenders against the government. Luke's role in this is really cool as well. He's now an old man just like Steve, and as he's aged, his bulletproof skin has begun to harden, giving him sort of like a Killer Croc sort of design where his skin looks all like scabby and scaly, but because it's been hardening and he can't move it because it's indestructible, it has prevented him from moving. So it's basically turned him into a cripple, and the only way he can move around is with a exosuit. And because he can't now, solve his problems by punching them like he would usually, he has become a spy master of sorts, which is a really cool role for Luke. It's completely different than what I had in mind for the character in this, and he has been running this ring of defense defenders who have been trying to like get their message out, their message of truth out, and they know only someone like Captain America can deliver that message. So there's also this amazing sort of undercurrent of Luke wants his friend to help out, but Luke also wants Captain America to help out because of what Captain America stands for, and like that image of Captain America can sell, and that's what it's all about in this generation, is like that image, what image sells well. And I like that Luke is trying to use that, and something tells me Steve isn't going to like that all that much, and I'm intrigued to see what Zdarsky is going to do with that, since that's a really interesting dynamic for those two characters to have. Luke isn't the only one as well, as Matt Murdock also makes an appearance, and kind of a funny role for him because he appears, we learned that he's, you know, still a lawyer working like cases of people who can't really afford all that much, lots of pro bono work, and then he's just killed off panel and just mentioned by Luke that he died. And I think that Zdarsky killing him off so he doesn't have to write more Daredevil, just because the man has written so much Daredevil over the last like 5 years, so I could understand him wanting to take Matt Murdock out of the equation and not have to worry about, you know, writing him. And I could also see it as him thinking maybe if he has him in the story, he might rely on him a bit too much as a crutch because he's written him for so long, so he knows the character a little bit more better than some of these other ones. So I kind of commend him for taking him out of the story like that and using it as a way to help fuel Steve's return to being Captain America as well, since his friend died, not seeing the freedom that they are fighting for ever realized. So I could see that being Steve's motivation to come back in a big way. Daniel Acuna joins Zdarsky, and oh man, I love David's work. He's definitely an artist who's not going to be everyone's favorite because his visual style is so unique and so bold, but I love it. I think it's great, and it fits in with the whole feel of the story, with how it's very much like a Kingdom Come-esque, whereas Kingdom Come had Alex Ross's art, which is very stark compared to like what you see in like a normal weekly comic book. It's very different, more prestige, and I like that that is brought to this book as well. It's a colourful artwork, but it's not afraid to go dark and rely on shadows to help tell the story. Old Steve also looks in parts really similar to Stan Lee, especially when he's got the big glasses on and that kind of silvery, slightly longer hair in the back. Feels like that was intentional, and I like the look on him. I think it looks great. It kind of harkens back to when Steve was an old man in the mainline comics for a while, and so it's a cool look for him. He wears it really well. One thing I also really like about the art is that every page looks like it was given the time and attention it deserved. Every page looks like it's had care taken with it. There's nothing rushed about this or anything, and I can't wait to see his work later in the series as the heroes get more involved and the action really kicks up. So Steve joins Luke's little underground resistance, and the book kind of powers through a lot of the stuff that I thought it was going to actually take us through pace by pace, as Steve learns the Avengers are invading other countries, and there's work camps for Americans being set up and they're being abused, and then Luke's guys just have remade the super soldier serum somehow and want to give it to Steve, since Steve no longer has it in his system and he's just a weak old man at this point. It all happens in the space of like 3 pages, and compared to the first half of the book, it just kind of settles you in there, and you know, you get to see a little bit of the setting and everything gets implied through the art of what's going on and everything, but here it just powers right through, and compared to the first part, it's really rushed. Like, I think it would have been cool seeing Steve going through the motions of training to become a soldier again and sort of, you know, toughening up his muscles again and going through that sort of reflex of like, oh, he knows what to do, but he's not strong enough yet, and then starts having doubts, since earlier in the book, Zdarsky plays with an idea that Steve is done with Captain America. He knows that people don't want those ideals anymore and just wants to help the world as Steve Rogers, which is why he ran for Senator Steve, and I think it would have been really neat to see him realize that at the end, where he's offered the soldier serum again and just flat out denies it because he wants to do this as Steve Rogers this time around. He doesn't want to do it as Captain America. He wants to do it as the common man, standing up against, you know, the evil regime, and I think that would have been really quite cool, and unfortunately it didn't seem like it went that way. We could still have parts of that story go on through Steve and Luke's interactions. As I said before, it feels like Luke is trying to co-opt Captain America's image for his own sort sort of mission and sort of push his narrative a little bit with that, like, hey, we've got Captain America, we're the good guys sort of thing. And I'm intrigued to see what Zdarsky is going to do with that, but it just feels like a missed opportunity to go this really personal route with Steve Rogers, who's always a man out of time, and he's trying his best to conform to the times, but it's being impossible for him. The book also features a classic backup from Ralph Macchio and Walt Simonson that's taken from, I believe, Avengers issue 300. It's just Loki fucking around with the Avengers, and they end up beating him and stealing him in a Leatherland tank. It's just a classic Avengers story, and it fits in really well with Zdarsky's story of remembering the good old days and, you know, bygone times and all of that. And it would be nice if, like, those stories end up being sort of like the background history of this world, and these are the adventures of, you know, the Avengers, Twilight Avengers. I think that would be quite cool, but it was a nice little backup. Nothing new, we've seen it before, but yeah, it was pretty cool. Zdarsky's foray into a future what-if Elseworld style story so far is off to a great start. It's a fantastic story about the world moving on without you and fighting for and against the future, all centered around Steve Rogers, the ultimate man out of time. I'm going to give this issue a 9 out of 10, so I thoroughly recommend you check it out. It's really quite cool. It's an interesting what if, and Marvel has been really lacking these as of late, despite them doing all those weird Venom what ifs, but this feels like a proper what if, and I'm really looking forward to seeing what Zdarsky and his team have in store for us.